Let's take a look at these 6 main features: containers, themes and styles, embedded views, binding and transforms, event handling, and mobile devices. And really, it's important to understand the capabilities and each of these features to have to know what's possible with these. Because once you know what's possible, when you're planning a project, you're going to have a much better sense of what you're going to need to do, or what questions you need to ask your users for how they're going to interact with the system. So let's start with container types in perspective. To accommodate the many different screen sizes from mobile devices all the way up to large screens, Perspective employs 5 container types to help lay out your design. The first is coordinate, there's column, breakpoint, flex, and tab containers. And I want to go through each of these container types and show you an example of how we would use those container types. And really, a container, just to set the tone here, is each container is a different layout manager, essentially, for how we work with components. We put components inside of containers, and each container interacts or does something different with those components especially for mobile responsive design. So let's start with the coordinate container. And this is similar to the relative layout in the vision module, and it's the simplest container, allowing you to add components using basic X, Y, width, and height properties. The coordinate container is perfect for dragging components to where you want to place them, exactly. And the components can be fixed in size, or you can make the components change in size proportionally when the view is stretched. So this is a pretty classic layout manager that we have, and one that was pretty much the only one that Vision had. And so let's take a look at an example of this container. So here I've got a Perspective project, and it's running here in Chrome. And I'm using the developer tool so that I can actually simulate going between different screen sizes. But if I look here, the coordinate, there's 2 modes for it. First mode is that we're on right now is fixed, which means the components are going to stay fixed in their position, and they're going to stay fixed in their size. So if I make the screen bigger or smaller, it's not going to change those components. And in this particular case, I now have a scroll bar at the bottom here to go left or right because they're off the screen. Or likewise, I have a scroll bar to go up and down here. If they go off the screen. So we have that because you need to have scroll bars because if they're fixed, I need to be able to see the whole thing. So it's a good layout manager. Typically, we use these for process screens where we can have HMI type screens there. And often we'll use the mode that is percentage. So if I switch this to %, essentially what this will do is now scale those components. So if I make the view bigger or the window bigger, then those components will also scale along with that. So if you can see here, you can see that my components are stretching along with that. And they're just doing that proportionally. So based on the size we save in the designer to the size that the runtime is, it'll proportionally scale those components. So it is a great layout manager, very, very useful for a lot of situations, but allows us to really think about components from a X, Y, width, and height way of looking at it. The second one is a column layout, and this is a simple approach to what can be termed responsive design. The process of developing the same view or similar ones in different ways to seamlessly accommodate everything from phone screens to 4K televisions in a single project and a single set of pages. In a column layout, the view or a container is divided into consistently sized and spaced columns. By default, there are 12 columns. Each component's width is described only by how many of these columns it spans. Since these columns will grow wider or narrower to accommodate changes in the width of the browser, elements in a column layout can stretch horizontally. And based on the different breakpoints that we define, we can have these components or views positioned in different locations on that grid, and of course spanning a certain number of columns. So it's a really great layout manager, very easy to work with, and is really the fastest to get into mobile responsive design. So if we take an example of this one, here I've got a tab here for column, and so I've got a number of views. So you can have, what's great about all these containers, you can contain a component or you can contain a embedded view, which can be another view, which can be a whole new set of things. So it's really powerful in how you can combine these. We'll talk more about that later. But here I've got some views, And they're really simple. They just have a label inside of them. And I've got 7 of them on this screen. And I have them positioned right now, in this way based on this size. So I have actually 3 breakpoints here with this column. So I have a large desktop, a tablet type, which is a medium size, and then a phone size. And as you'll see, if I make this a little bit smaller, when I actually cross that threshold, now you can see these components are now oriented differently for my middle display. So I see all the same views, but they're just now oriented here and more optimized for that view. If I go down to a phone, you'll see that now they're all simply just in one column as separate rows. So you can actually define those positions and those breakpoints very easily. And you can have any number of breakpoints that you want, and you can position these components any way that you want there. And as you can see, those components will stretch. They'll fill in those spaces if you span that, will stretch as the browser gets bigger. So it's a really great one, and we use this layout quite a bit in our demo project. Okay, the next one is the breakpoint layout, and this is the most comprehensive choice when you want to develop a project that works for sessions of many shapes and sizes. Unlike column and flex layouts, which offer ways of controlling how a fixed set of components respond to changes in screen size, a breakpoint layout expects 2 entirely distinct subviews. This makes the breakpoint layout a powerful but more involved choice of layout. The breakpoint container layout is a fundamentally simple layout consisting of a single breakpoint, so there's one size, and you can have 2 child views. So if you see on the screen here, I've got that small view on the left and the large view on the right. In other words, the breakpoint layout offers the opportunity to create 2 different views that are shown at 2 distinct ranges of layout widths. So again, depending on that size, we'll automatically switch it to use either the small or the large view. So it's a really great layout. If I look here, this is often used where on a large display, we might show the full process. Maybe that the view we're showing is a coordinate, and it's the full, HMI, screen. If I'm on a phone, though, I don't want to scrunch that. So on a phone size, I can show a more optimized view, a smaller view of that process. In this example that I'm showing here, I'm showing a table on a large display because often you control all the columns, you have more real estate to do that. But if I'm on a phone, then I would want to show a different way of looking at that data. In this case, I'm using a card layout. So I can see the same data, but now as cards instead of the table. And so we're going between these 2 separate views here. But the data is fundamentally the same, but the 2 different ways of looking at it. So again, going back higher, I now look at the table. So a great one to use when you need to. All right, the next one is the Flex layout, and this is a powerful layout manager. It has many configuration options, and it's based on CSS Flexbox. So those of you who are, do a lot of it, web programming, done a lot of work with CSS, you might be familiar with this layout manager. We're basically making it easy to use inside of Ignition. And this consists of a single series of adjacent components or containers configured as either a column or a row. And it has a lot of different options. As you can see with these pictures here, we can have, if I have a single row for our components, if I have a single row here, I can have them simply just stretched in that space. I can have them fixed if I want to. I can make one of them grow while the others stay fixed. I can align them in a grid. I can, you can all these different options that are there. You can have a stack. You can have things wrap. It just gives you a lot of flexibility. And it's really kind of simple because it only has a couple of properties that you configure on in a component, which is this thing called basis, grow, and shrink. Basically, if you want it to grow, or if you want to be allowed to shrink, and if what you want the actual size to be. So it is ideal for mobile responsive design, especially for things that are typically laid out as a grid or in these kind of ways. It gives you that flexibility. So looking at example here, I've got one. And I'm showing this one now as a row. So again, it can only be either a row or a column. And the great thing is you can combine these together you can have a row, and inside that, one of the embedded views could be of a flex that is a column. So I can actually combine both of these things together. And that's the power of perspective. It gives you the ability to combine all these layouts together in different ways. And so here, this one is set, so as you can see, view 1 and view 3 have specific sizes, and they're not changing. The middle view is getting bigger. But if I get smaller, I basically say the middle view, once it gets to a point where I don't want it to go away, then it's going to stay that size. Now you'll see that view 1 and view 3 are actually getting smaller. And you can choose if you want that or not. You may want to have scroll bars and never do that. Again, a lot of options. And the same thing here is a column. Same kind of idea as a column there. Again, you can go either way. Okay, so the tab container is a really simple layout, and it allows you to define tabs that run at the top of the layout. As you can see here, example, region and events. So it's a true tab layout that in each of those tabs you can have a component or an embedded view that can be whatever layout you want within that. And what's important about this one is that the tab container, the reason that we have it as a container is that it only activates the contents when you're on that tab. Whereas in Vision, if you want to do tabs in Vision, you could have a tab component, and you might have containers that you would make visible or invisible based on the tab that's selected. But those containers were actually on the screen and always running. In this particular case, only the tab that is open is the one that's running. And you can, again, contain whatever you want inside of it. And again, there's a lot of options for how this works. And we're actually making extensive use of the tab container within this example here. This top part is each of these coordinate, column, breakpoint, flex, and tab. Each of those inside are separate embedded views. So this is the tab layout here. On the flex and on the tab, I have another set of tabs below that where I'm going between two different sets of views there as well. So this one, I got tab 1, tab 2, and those are looking at two different views down here at the bottom. So it's a really powerful one, again, one that you can use. The real power of all of this is the ability to combine the different layouts together. And we can nest these as much as we want, as far as deep as you want it to go. You can start with flex. You can then have a coordinate inside that, or a column inside that, or you can have a breakpoint. Inside that can be coordinate and column or flex. I mean, you can really go at it. And if you understand these fundamentally, when you wireframe, which we'll talk more about later, you'll know what to start with and what to then use inside of it. Okay. So the perspective module, now moving from the containers to themes and styles, the module uses HTML5 and CSS. So you can build screens that are ideal for web browsers and mobile devices. You can set initial styling to all your components using a theme. So we have the ability to do theming inside perspective. And you can initially set the theme to either a light or a dark theme for your components. That will be there throughout the entire session. And as of 8.0.13, which I'm going to show you, it's about ready to go out. That's the version I'm using here in the demo. We have full support for theming across all of our components, and I will show an example here. But with theming, that gives you the ability to create your own themes, and you can stylize everything based on this theme. You can then, inside of the designer, you can specify styles that you can use within different components. That can basically define colors and fonts in one place that many places could take advantage of and use. You can even then, of course, put styling on an object itself. We call that inline styling. So a lot of ways to use this. So let's take a look at the demo here first, where we can look at themes. And so here I right now have the light theme that's selected. And if I go here and set this to, let's say, a light cool, there's many different themes now that 8.0.13 has. There's a cool, there's a warm, there's a dark theme. As you can see, all the components will automatically change their look and their feel based on that theme that's there. We can, of course, then go in and define our own themes as well within the designer or within the system. And if I look at, let me go here to this one as an example. If I look at these guys, these labels, these are actually styled with actual style classes. Over here, you can see there's classes, and I have this animated label and this value label. And these are two styles that we've set up. So if I look at the animated label, it's a style that has two different stops, so 0 and 100 here, and it's animating between those. And you can see it's going from the foreground color being black, yellow background, to the foreground color being white with the red background. You can see that animation going back and forth between the two. So we have the ability to use these styles, which we can associate with objects and associate with many objects, and we have the ability to do theming. Theming starts first, styles override theming, and then custom styling inside of an object will then override the style. So you can kind of chain that together and figure out how you want that to look. Very much how CSS really works there. So next is looking at embedded views and parameters. And the embedded view component allows you to include an entire view inside of another. You can use this component to select the view to display. You can pass parameters into the view. And because of this, you can make views actually act as templates for information. So for example, you can create a tank view and embed several into another larger view that shows an overview of the facility. The embedded view is different than the container because you cannot alter the contents of the embedded view, but it allows you to, you know, to really create these templates that you can reuse multiple times. And a container itself allows you to contain a bunch of different components, or potentially just one component. So they're subtle difference between the two, but it's important to kind of understand that. And if we look at going back here to the demo, let me set this back to my light theme here. And if I go over to my embedded views, I've got a bunch of embedded views on here. This motor one is a a template that I built, and I can have on the screen multiple times, as you're seeing here. I've actually embedded that full container, that view that we're looking at over here. For the containers, I embedded it into this one. So we can embed views anywhere. It's really powerful in perspective. We can take views, embed them everywhere. And even components, either some more advanced components like tables allow you to embed views inside cells, and you can really go further. So this concept of embedding is really quite important. If I look at the designer here for a moment, let me go over to the actual embedded views area. And so what I have on this one, so here, for example, is that motor. This is an embedded view. How I created that was by simply, in this particular case, because you can make views, you can have drag and drop targets for tags. I can drag a tag right into this screen. So let's drag it in here, and it knows there's a view with that drop target for that motor, and I can create it. And then now I've got that there. I can use this many times. If I go back, let me change one of these so you can see that the value, of course, is different in there. If I go back to that embedded view, so let me go here to the motor. Let's say I wanted to change something with this. Maybe I want this text here to be bold. Maybe have a background color on it. Whoops. Let's go here. Have a background color. We'll do like a light gray here. And let's make it a little bit lighter. And then maybe I want the text to be bold. Okay, so I made a small little change, and we're going to save that. And now you can see that all of my templates have updated. And if I save that further, going back to the example, now all of those have updated there. So again, really powerful to be able to do this, having embedded views there. And again, you can really embed them anywhere you want. All the containers we talked about before, and you can embed views inside of other views. You can go as far as you want with that.